guys, my name is Ramon and I'm working with Memoryz, and today we're having another installation of our caregiver interviews, and I'll throw it over for you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you and your caregiving background.
Sure. My name is Lauren. I am an only child, and my mom has dementia, and she lives in a residential care facility. I hate the word facility, but it just it never rolls off your tongue. She lives in a residential group home for memory loss. I didn't know I was a caregiver until I was like 3 years into it, so that's still a new term for me. I was just a daughter trying to do what's best for my mom. So I've started at the beginning of having the difficult conversations and getting the proper paperwork in order to make decisions down the road, to facilitating moves, to answering difficult questions, dealing with transitions from living independently to memory care and all of the things that go with it. So I'm really just kind of a rookie that's been down the path, and my path is it still exists. My mom is still with me, but yeah, it's been an interesting experience. I guess caregiver is how you sum it up, right?
Sure, for sure. Well, thank you so much for giving us that insight. Definitely would love to learning more about you and your background. I know you mentioned that you didn't really realize you were a caregiver until about 3 years into it. So maybe could you tell us like what that initial diagnosis was like, and what some of the first signs were, and kind of what steps you took in order to kind of get to where you are in your caregiving journey?
Sure. Yeah. My mom, she started making some decisions that didn't seem super logical, regarding, just her own, she was living here and I was going about my business, and it just didn't, they were unusual. And I just kind of chalked it up to maybe she was missing me because I moved, and things like that. And then she actually started referencing me in a small window, like in the third person, while she was talking to me, and I just thought that's not right. And the diagnosis was actually really hard because sometimes they won't go to the doctor, and sometimes and I mean, I know this now, but lots of people have found that they're just really good at covering it up. Because could you imagine if you realized what was happening and you're just holding on so tight to some semblance of normalcy, and that you don't want anyone in to know, because I mean, her fear was like her freedom's going to be taken away. So when she had enough wits about her, she was trying so hard to make sure that like she didn't do that, like maybe it was in her control. So I couldn't get her to go to the doctor, until we had progressed significantly farther down the line. And even then, like, sometimes you find that some doctors are more helpful than others, and some have a better way of explaining it than others. And if you only get one chance for this diagnosis and this experience, and you get somebody who's not really gonna walk you through it, you have early stages of dementia, and that's what you're left with. Not what kind, not what you should move forward with, but just here's some things that you should look out for. So I still don't know what her story is. I just and by the time that it progressed as fast as it did, what's the point of putting her through all of those procedures to help me understand? I mean, sometimes it can be for clinical trials and things like that, which is great, but knowing her wishes, it's not something that worked for her. So I didn't realize I was a caregiver until people started talking to me about all the things I was doing. I mean, I had just gotten married. I had a full-time job. I had just moved, but I'm filling out this paperwork. I'm taking constant calls. Like, she's asking me how to make the same recipe that, she gave me, and just trying to connect like what's acclimating to a new space and what's not right. And when you only have one person to bounce that back off of, you don't want to be the one that's like, wait a second, is this really what I'm dealing with here? So it can be tricky. Getting a diagnosis doesn't always mean anything. You're still doing it regardless of, the seal of medicine or not.
For sure, and thank you so much for kind of providing that insight. I think that's definitely something that we haven't heard before, but it's a reality. when the loved one is finding out that they're starting to experience these symptoms and they're holding on to that sense of normalcy and fighting to deny it, I think that can definitely make the process a lot more challenging. It sounds like you're at a really exciting point in your life with your career established and a new like marriage. So how was this time in your period, this period of time for you emotionally? How did that kind of impact you?
I mean, because it's just been my mom and I, like I look out for her, right? No matter what. And I didn't think, as things progressed and I moved away, and I got a new job or whatever, and I got married, I, um, you look out for your family, right? And you don't put it into this bucket that something's wrong. It's not like something that just happens right away. Oftentimes it's a slow burn. But I will remember like the planning of my wedding, knowing that this was supposed to be a big deal. She just wasn't herself, and she had all of these reasons, and that was just my mom. Like she was really good, like, oh, I don't have a cold, like I just have a cough, and she's just like, oh, I didn't get very much sleep last night, or I haven't eaten, and like there was always something for why she wasn't like 100% there. But on my wedding day, she actually left at like 8 o'clock. And like, she's my family. And she was just like, I just need to go to bed. And I love her. And I knew that things weren't right, but I couldn't define it. And I didn't know. And like, it was like after the dinner or whatever. And she gave all she could. But I'm like, that's not something my mom would have done. And that's when I knew like something just isn't right. But so I had a lot of time to sit and think about that. At the time, I was just really upset. I'm like, what do you mean you're leaving? Like, it's 8 o'clock. You can't leave my wedding. And so in the moment, it's super painful. And you're like, I don't get it. I don't know what else to do. And it can spoil a lot of things that she didn't, if she knew that had happened, she would be mortified. But I think you have to get through the caregiving process a little bit longer to be able to look back and be like, oh, it totally makes sense now. Because when you're in it with that emotion from that day, and that instance. And when something stings like that, you hold on to the sting, not all of the things around it that could have led to that. And you can't always see it right away. Does that make sense?
For sure, for sure. And I think that reaction is totally normal. I think especially in a day like that with someone you're so close to, like in that way. So I think that reaction is totally justified. I can even imagine having to experience that.
Just like,
Um,
but you're just like, what? What do you mean you're leaving? And I'm not married anymore, so it doesn't really matter. But it's like, but at least she got to be there. But yeah, it's so weird. It's just weird. It's weird how it's weird how it presents itself, to where you're like, what's going on, to whoa.
for sure, for sure, for sure. And thank you so much for really sharing that side of yourselves. I know that's probably a really difficult thing to talk about, but we really appreciate you sharing your story.
For
Um,
sure.
so I guess like my next question would be beyond the diagnosis. You mentioned earlier that your mother currently lives in like a long-term care, place of long-term care. So I was just wondering like what the journey was from that diagnosis and when you started to witness the signs up until kind of where she is now, and if you could maybe walk us through that journey and how you came to that decision.
Sure. So my mom lived where I originally lived, up north in the Fargo-Moorhead area in Minnesota/North Dakota. Um, and I just knew that she needed to be closer. So I figured out, she is not someone who has long-term care insurance, and she's not someone who had a 401k set up. So we had to be thoughtful about how we were going to do this. Thankfully, Minnesota they do a really good job taking care of their aging citizens and having opportunities, for housing available, maybe more so than others. But I put her on a waiting list and she got an apartment, and it was just like a 55 plus kind of a building. And she carried on pretty well for a while, like it was an adjustment in itself, moving from the place that she's always been to a new city, in a new apartment, and getting used to like driving around and all of those things. But she established a routine really well for herself. And then when we started to notice, when she was struggling, the phone calls were increasing, asking for recipes, talking, like doing things very strategically. Like she would start her day this way, go here only, maybe stop at Arby's and get a sandwich. Food. I work at a hunger relief organization, so noticing when the fridge starts to empty and it's condiments and it's just like a can of beans and some bread, because they don't want to cook anymore. That was a sign. But socially, she was starting to get rejected from some of the folks that she was hanging out with in her building, because the conversations did start to become a little repetitive and they didn't understand what was happening. So I pushed for her, and it was not easy, but to move into an assisted living kind of a community for just that, the social well-being of it, the fact that they did things together, they went places, they like you could take a shuttle to the store or what have you. And so, we talked about that, and she was resistant, but I had to show her, like I physically took her there. I handled a lot of the details on the forefront without her, and then made sure to kind of blow it up. Like, you get to pick your apartment, like they're all the same. Like you can pick what floor you're on. And she knew because she didn't want to be a burden to me that this was something that had to happen, but she wasn't happy about it. But what no one explained to me was what happens. They talk to you about the dining. They talk to you about the amenities. And they talk to you about all of the cool things you can do, from going to the movies to, game night or happy hour or eating out on the patio. No one talks to you about what it's like if you're moving someone who's from living independently into another situation. Anyone struggling with any degree of memory loss. And for me, I knew things weren't right. I didn't have necessarily a diagnosis yet. I hadn't crossed that bridge yet, but she was having some struggles. And she just snapped, and she had no control over it, because like when I said, when you hold on to your routine and you're so specific and you're trying so hard not to forget and to not let this happen, your brain can't handle this new scenario. Your routine has been shattered. None of the same places you were going, you can go or you have access to. Part of this was taking away her car. I thankfully didn't have to take it away. There was a parking garage. And so I took the keys and we parked it underneath, and I said, it's winter time, you don't want to be driving around in a new area and, when it's icy and things like that. So let's just park it, and then you can drive in the spring again. It's no big deal, knowing that I would eventually have to have that conversation again. But no, she didn't make it that far. This building was so nice, and it was new, and it was like a shiny new penny, right? And everybody, I get that they mean well, and I'm not dogging on any of these places. These people that work and care for our loved ones work hard, okay? But sometimes they're not ready yet, and there are a number of different reasons why there might not be enough staff on hand or whatever. But this particular building was not equipped to transition a new resident, right? Or a number of new residents as they're filling their rooms. And it's beautiful, but all of the floors look the same. So you come in and you go in the elevator and you go up to your room, you go down. If she was there about a week and a half before she started just walking, trying to figure out getting into the apartment directly below hers, and then the one directly below that, because she couldn't figure out how to get back to the third floor. So they were pressuring me a little bit to move her into memory care. I'm like, how can you say that? Not only do I not have a diagnosis right now, but she was driving her car 3 months ago to my house to come see me. And that is not a connection that I was willing to make without, a second opinion of some kind. But she was walking. She was just, and now we know what she was just trying to get acclimated, but she was lost. And I would get 40 calls a day while I'm at work, walking her in my mind from where she is, that she told me where she was to find the dining room, back to her house. And then she would go down somewhere else to go to the laundry or whatever. And she would call me 10 minutes later, and I'd have to physically walk her back in my mind. And that just went on, and until she wasn't leaving. She just wouldn't go anywhere. She'd start to pack up her things and put them by the door, because she was making herself feel better, like, I'm going to get out of here. This is not for me. I don't like it here. She didn't have a chance to get to know the staff. Some of the staff got annoyed because this person's just walking around constantly needing to be redirected. There was no transition. She was just, here's your apartment. Good luck, everybody. And I didn't know the questions to ask. No one told me that this was going to be a bumpy ride. So to me, that's very jarring to be all hours of the night with an infant. I have my baby carrier or whatever, and I'm driving over to make sure that my mom can make it down to the dining room for three square a day, making sure that she's not going to bed when the sun sets, because it's dark out, because she was going to bed at 5 o'clock, and then she'd wake up for the day at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and go out in the halls again. And to them, they're like, what's going on? No one's helping her get down. Do you know what I'm saying?
Sure, for sure.
So then she ended up, the best that I could do was she ended up in memory care, because I couldn't help her from where I was, and they weren't equipped to do it. And I felt awful. And she basically just was stuck there. And I'm like, I can't have it be like this. But the slippery slope from leaving your comfort level and your routine to memory care can be, if you aren't aware, very fast. So within 6 months, she's in memory care. And a year later, she's at a residential, she's at a group home right now. And there's only 9 other women that live there. It's a house. It's very cute. She can't take care of herself anymore. She lost a lot of the things that she was able to do for herself a year prior, just like that, because she had nothing to grab from. And that's really hard to watch, because then who feels responsible for making that happen? This girl. Because all I wanted her to do was to have somebody to eat lunch with, or somebody that would understand why she's maybe having some of these conversations the way that she is. And I basically felt like for a really long time that I just propelled her forward into where she's at right now. And I'm like, she was driving her car. She was driving her car like less than a year before she ended up in memory care.
Wow, that's incredibly rapid decline. I couldn't even imagine having to go through that, especially being like a new mother, balancing a job. Like I could, and I kind of want to like even just touch into that when you have this like constant fear about like her well-being and whether or not she's going to be able to make it back to her room okay, and whether or not she's feeling comfortable. How did that affect like your career? And then I guess kind of what advice would you give to kind of new caregivers who had loved ones who have recently been diagnosed, or their loved ones are starting to show signs? Like, what advice would you have to kind of balance career and being a caregiver?
I was very lucky because I'm employed for an organization that gets it's Meals on Wheels, right? That gets food to folks who have trouble getting out. So the understanding of taking care of your aging loved ones was not something that I had to explain to my employer. That's not the case for everybody. And it's really hard. It is really hard. And people talk about self-care and like, do all these things, also very important. But when you are in it to the point where you have no idea what's going on, this is all new. You need to make sure your kid eats, that you go to work, and that your mom isn't stuck in the hallway for 2.5 hours multiple times a day. There is no room for self-care in there, because you are surviving, right? So there is a year where I was just like trying to make sure that I got to enjoy like the little things with my kid, and like I'm bringing him with, and she gets to see him, but it's like you're like, yay, I have a baby, and like this is so cute. And you could be at a shower or a birthday party or whatever, and the phone rings. And then you immediately have to go around the corner and your brain just shifts. All right, now I'm taking care of somebody else, and I need to make sure that I can visualize where she's at and help her get back. Do I leave a message for the nurse? Like, did they call me back? Like, has she gotten her meds today? Like, when was the last time that she ate? If she missed lunch just now, you don't have time for that when you are the only person and you are in it. And it's sometimes it just is what it is. And it's not until you can become over here and look back at what happened that you realize you were just surviving. And that's when you're like, now I need to take a minute for myself. And so sometimes you just have to realize, is she healthy? Is she safe? Is she as happy as she can be at the moment? Is my kid the same? Then I just need to take a minute for myself, because I need to let my brain regroup. But it's hard, and no matter how much time you tell yourself that the self-care is important, if you don't have anybody else to draw from, you're screwed, and you just have to do it. And it's just like that sometimes, but you make it, and you get through it, because that's what you do. But that doesn't make it any less hard.
For sure, for sure. Thank you so much for sharing that perspective. And I honestly just want to just delve a little bit deeper into some of the things you just mentioned towards the end about like just struggling to actually like take that time for yourself, take a break, and then realize that you need to prioritize yourself in order to be the best caregiver to your child and to your loved one. So I guess what are some like tangible strategies that you would use, like when you would take those minutes, when you would take those moments to actually, even if it was for a moment, feel better, just to release some of the stress, like checking in yourself? Like, what are some of the strategies you use to accomplish that?
Well, so I read something a little while back. It was somebody else's quote. It's not mine. But they learned that no is a full sentence, full stop, right? And that is something that I am holding on to henceforth. Um, I don't have a strategy. We all have vices, right? Whether you're somebody that wants to go and get an icy, or you run. I started running again, or are you reading a book? You just have to pick your things. Some of us are smokers and we wish we weren't smokers, but you have to give yourself a little bit of a reprieve. You're like, now's not the best time to quit. Like you were thinking about it, but you're like, I just need a minute. And if that's your only minute, then you have to recognize that. um, and saying no. It's just like, I think I just kind of flipped. I'm in Minnesota. Everybody is supposed to be Minnesota nice, right? So you have the long goodbyes and you're always like, sure, whatever. And when you're a caregiver, you kind of fall into this mentality where you are a helper, like you're good at it because you're doing it and you want to help other people. And sometimes you just can't, like you can't add anything else to your plate. And while that feels weird to you, that's your moment. I can't take anything else on right now, like, oh, do you guys want to go? I'm sorry, I just can't. I just need an evening where I don't, where I'm still going to have to answer the phone, but I don't want to have to explain why I'm leaving or why I can't stay. I just need to be somewhere else, and not have to explain it. But once you're out of that, like, the eye of the hurricane, right? When everything is new and changing and different, and you're just learning as you go. When you get on the outside, self-care to me is having a weekend where my son is with his grandparents or whatever, right? And it's a beautiful weekend, and I can go for a run, I can go grab a coffee, I can go do all of these things. But I'm like, I should be going and visiting my mom. And see, and I could, or if I have my son with me, it's just like he really wants to go for a bike ride. I should be going and visiting my mom. But you know what my mom would say? You do you, Lauren. She wouldn't want me to, like, it's totally fine. She wouldn't want me to not do those things because I felt obligated to go and see her. Does that make sense?
For
So it's
sure.
like, it doesn't feel like the greatest self-care, but knowing that you can say no, and you have to choose you sometimes means not checking off all the things on your list, and not visiting. If it's a day where it just works out, you have to pick you that day, because you're still a caregiver and you still care and you still love them, but you matter too. So it's not always, for me, it's not always about yoga, or going for a run or whatever. It's the ability to recognize that you're important too.
No, I love that point. I really do. I think it's something that's really difficult to come to terms with, especially when you're like a new caregiver and you want to do your best to make sure that you're providing the best experience possible for your loved one. But you're not able to do that until you realize that exactly what we said, like you matter as well.
And you can't feel bad about not visiting. You can't be all things to all people and nothing to yourself. And the people that you love that are in there, you just have to flip it. And it's not something that happens right away. Like, that is not a realization that I was just like, we're good. It started in baby steps, right? Until you just realize, like, oh, okay, this is what I have to do. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But as long as you dip your toe a little bit more, into taking a little bit more time, ultimately you realize that I can go tomorrow. I will bring her the cookies I wanted to bring her tomorrow. I will take her to this thing or whatever, and just do it that way.
No, for sure, for sure, for sure. And honestly, we just want to thank you again for like sharing those tidbits of advice, because I think any caregiver is kind of watching this right now. We just really appreciate your perspective from someone who's maybe not going through exactly what they've been through, but has gone down a similar path and has come out on the other side okay.
For sure.
Um, so I guess like on my last question that I kind of wanted to discuss with you was like your journey on social media. I mean, that's how we found you. I know you mentioned that you're working with someone else to kind of share your caregiving story. So I'd love if you kind of tell us a little bit more about that and kind of what prompted you to be on social media as a caregiver.
Sure. So I'm new. I had a blog, and I used my blog as kind of an outlet, kind of like a journal, I guess, but I only got like four posts deep. So it's not like I really kept it up. I am not a blogger. But I feel like I have the ability to just kind of put out some nuggets, some brief, just like here and there. And again, fully recognizing that my perspective is just that. It's just mine, right? Everybody else's is different, and everyone has valuable things to add. I learned a lot of some of the things that I've, thinking about to share is ways to spend time. If you have someone that you can't talk to and you're sitting in there, like, do you just sit on the couch every time and like watch TV? Like, because you don't want, like, how can you interact with them? Like, ask them if they have any socks to match, and get a laundry basket and sit down and like just like put some, do something together, go for a walk. Those are the kinds of things that I'm interested in sharing. I have the perspective of the daughter, and from filling out power of attorney paperwork and having the healthcare directive conversations that no one told me that I was going to have, in my early 30s. But I also have a partner. Her name is Dawn, and she lost her husband to FTD, and she has a lot of great to get like together. We just have had some great chats, and we decided to collaborate on the wife perspective. I mean, from like, I from being on a a experimental drug, to try to combat it, and dealing with some of the side effects that can be quite comical, to when was the last time you heard somebody talking about what it's like to be a partner to someone who wants to have sex with you in a marriage with dementia? What's that like? Do you know what I mean? And so she's a great writer. I'm excited to share some of her blog pieces, and we're just going to put ourselves out there, but we're also open to hearing from others, and hopefully somebody finds it helpful. But my main goal is to kind of draw a light on the fact that not all of this is full of grief, and not all of this needs to be full of stress. Sometimes it's tangible things you can take away that are helpful in your caregiving journey. And other times it's just like, I really feel strongly about the staffing shortage that we're dealing with here, not only just in the United States, but everywhere. and figuring out how to solve that problem, because it's only going to get worse. And frankly, you know, there's a lot of people who don't think that it's important to them right now, but they have no idea how quickly that can turn on a dime.
Right.
And you know, these are important jobs being done that are necessary. And sometimes bad things happen when you're stretched thin. And you know, there just needs to be a solution. So that's the other piece that we're really passionate about.
Sure, for sure, for sure. Um, well, I guess I don't really have any more questions for you right now. So I just wanted to thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. I definitely think that your page is going to be incredibly successful. So if anyone wants to kind of reach out and like learn more about some of the stories you're going to be posting, like where can they find you?
So I am a family on paper. So I have that on. You can find me the same way on Facebook or Instagram, and then the same with the blog. It's a WordPress blog. But as in the coming weeks, we're going to be making a little bit of a shift. Hopefully, easier to find. But a family on paper is how you can find me. And that's
Nice.
a play on the power of attorney, birth certificates, you know, like all the people that, you know, and ultimately it all comes back to putting your name on that, to making sure you can make the decisions, right?
Mhm.
So, but yeah, I appreciate you putting that out there.
For sure, for sure. So I guess everyone check out Ad Family on Paper. We'll have them linked in the bio below. And just want to thank you so much again for taking the time to chat with us. We really appreciate hearing your insights.
Thank you. I
Sure.
appreciate you here.
So be sure to tune in to our next caregiver interview and have a great day.